Here from Art Zone. I've got a little watercolour sketch for you today. So here I am just drawing out my bowl. It's going to be of a cactus. It's the first time I've ever done one, and I'm trying out my new Daniel Smith watercolour paints. I got some for Christmas, so I thought I'd give them a go. Just getting all my measurements right. It takes me a few minutes, and now I'm drawing the actual cactus. I haven't really got a reference photo, so this is just sort of from my mind. Perhaps it would have been better to have used a reference, but there you go, that's me. So I'm just refining the drawing. I'm keeping it quite light with the graphite because I don't want the watercolour, I don't want it to show through the watercolour, so it might be quite difficult for you to see, but as I put the paint on you will see where the actual drawing is, and as it happens, once it was finished I did cover the pencil so I didn't need to rub it out after. But another thing you could do is to draw this onto normal paper, print it out, and then with tracing paper trace it very lightly onto your watercolour card. I just went for it on this one, but that is something I know lots of people do, and I have tried it. So again, I'm just getting rid of all the marks that I don't particularly want, and reinforcing those that I do. It's always good really to use a reference. My granddad used to grow these, so I had a good sort of idea of what I was doing. This is just a set of brushes that I'm going to be using, just various sizes, and this is my palette with my paints, and it's a small set from Daniel Smith. So there we go. So here I am. I'm just putting on a water glaze on the background to start, just to help the colours flow a little bit, because I really want a mottled background. I don't want anything too flat. I want to sort of give it some artistic expression. So I'm just tearing off some tissue paper, getting some ready to use, and I'm going to catch that drip before it goes onto the actual cactus. So I'm just going round the drawing into on the negative spaces, just to as you can see, I've had a purple. I mixed up the purple that I was going to use, and it's still a little bit on my brush, which is why you can see it, but I think for the video it's quite useful as well. So I start off in sort of quite a large area, put all my water in, making sure I get into all the little nooks and crannies, and then I start to add my paint. As you can see, the paper started to buckle really quickly. This is quite a thin watercolour paper, because it was just an experiment really. When you use heavier paper you don't get so much of that buckling. And I've also taped the paper down to help it sort of dry back flat, which it did do, so that was quite useful. But it's quite warm in my studio, and as you can see, the paint still didn't flow very much, so I had to add more water to it to get it to sort of move about how I wanted it. I do love that colour. It's a very dark purple, as in not bright, and I do love the effects. The reason I chose Daniel Smith was because I'd read and I'd seen his many of the colours granulate as they're drying, and give a really good texture, and this is something that I wanted to get in my background, and I think I've achieved some of that. I can't remember which colours do granulate and which can't, so it's all going to be a bit of an experiment for me. I've speeded it up a little bit here now. I'm not really painting that fast, but I thought you'd get quite bored if I did the whole video just in real time. So I've started to add some Mayo blue here as well, which is quite nice. I will list the colours at the end of the video for you if you are interested. And now I'm repeating that process the other side. I quite enjoyed doing this painting. Cactus isn't something that I would normally do. Well, as I say, this is my first time, and although I don't think it's particularly successful as a watercolour study of a cactus, it's not meant to be. I'm not doing a botanical painting. I'm just doing a sort of an expressive piece, but I quite like it. The water did flow a little bit better this side. I managed to get it on a bit quicker, and slightly darker in that corner. I decided that my light is going to be coming from the right hand side, so the left hand side is slightly darker, and as I go ahead and do the actual plant itself, you'll see that happening more and more. So I've got some stones at the top of my pot, so here I am just painting those in, and mainly for these I use neutral tint. So I'm putting on my colour and then taking it back off again to get my lighter side and to give some interest to the stone. And so I'm getting on my first layer of colour, and I will go back after and just define them a little bit more. It's interesting how many sort of colours you can get from the one colour, if that makes sense. I did add some burnt umber to a couple of the stones just to give a little bit of different interest. And once the watercolours are dry, I do use some polychromos pencils just to add a little bit more definition, but you'll see that towards the end of the video. So now I've speeded it up a little bit, again just to get through it a bit quicker. But I did each stone the same way, put on my colour, and then with a clean dry brush took it back off again where I wanted my sort of highlight and to give some definition to the stone and make it look more 3D. Usually when I'm doing some watercolours like this, I don't do the same, I don't follow each area after the other. So for instance, I did the first stone and then I moved to the edge of the pot before I did the next one. And now that the first one was dry, I could go back and work onto the one next to it. Especially if you're using a lot of paint and you work next door to each other, you will find that the colour will run. So now I've moved on to the sort of table that the pot is stood on to allow them stones to dry, and I'm just laying in a quick wash of colour. Again, the Mayan blue, which is quite a lovely blue. I quite like it, and I'm just laying that in. Making sure I get right up to the edges, so that and to fill those tiny little gaps so that the pot looks like it's set on something rather than just having a blue black background. And now I'm just taking the purple background to the edges and then softening that with some clean water. The masking tape I've used is the first time I've used it as well, so I'll be interested to see how it actually peels off. The other masking tape I have, this sort of the old-fashioned cream tape, is very, very old and it tends to tear my paper, so I'll be interested to see how I get on with this. As you can see, I've gone back to the stones. I'm repeating the process, putting it on, then using a dry damp brush to take some off to add contours. So this one, you can see I've changed the colour slightly. Still completed in the same way, but I've left that edge and then just gently softened the colour into it, so I get a nice light side. And being very careful on this one because that other edge of the brown one is still very wet, so I'm being very careful to make sure I don't cross over so that the colours don't bleed into each other. And then dabbing it with a tissue just to add again a bit more texture. And I'm just at the moment mixing my colours for the actual cactus itself, and I used the Mayo blue and yellow ochre to create this very pale green, and I'm going to just give the whole plant a wash of this colour, and then later on I go on to add a darker green to add more sort of texture. And again, the green that I use does do the granulation, and you can see the way I'm using my brush, I'm sort of adding texture as I go. And so I'm doing a wash of water. I don't do that on all of these, I kind of mix it up. And I'm just experimenting. It's the first time I've used these brushes, so they're quite new to me, so I'm not really sure how they apply the paint, so I'm just sort of playing, really, just seeing how it goes. Making sure I get into those little corners because I don't want them missing. Just moving that paint around, and then with a clean dry brush I just remove some, just to leave myself some light. And again, as you can see, I've gone straight in now with the wet on dry, so I'm really just experimenting, seeing which way I like to go. And there's no rhyme or reason as to why I'm choosing what I'm choosing. I am just, just going with the flow, really, just having some fun. So a bit too much water there. I didn't want it dripping onto my background. Again, I've taken out some light, or taken out some paint to leave a lighter area. Giving each one, see I'm doing it very carefully, I'm not quite sure whether that one below is dry. I think it is, but just making sure. And there they are, all just with their first layer, and just zoomed in there so you can see a little bit. And then I'm mixing up my darker green. Again, I can't remember the name of it at the moment because I'm not familiar with some of the names of these paints, but I will leave a list of them at the end of the video. And just dropping that colour on. And I'm doing it like that because I want to really create texture with my paint. And just having fun. I'm showing this in real time, and then I'll move on and speed it up. But just to show you how I do it initially. And then softening that area with a clean, dryish or damp brush. It's not dry, it's damp. And then just bringing that colour in a little bit, but still leaving a lighter area. And using the very tip of the brush to get into all those little parts. And again, you'll see me do that this side as well. I'm just dragging that down a little bit. That's it. And just taking it slightly to the edge, because even though you've got light there, it just gives the impression of the plant bending round. And then softening it off there so that I don't leave a hard edge. Again, putting on a glaze of water just to help. I'm just keeping an eye on the one that I'd already done so it doesn't drip. And softening that edge. Going back to the one I've just started and then dropping my colour in. I'm no expert at this. I've only just recently started playing with watercolours, but I'm really enjoying learning about them and what you can do with them. And I think it's going to be quite a long journey. You can see that I didn't like the shape of that one, so I've added a little bit more. It looked like it had part of it missing for me, and so with the darker colour I added some more. So don't think just because you've drawn something and you're stuck with it, you can alter it still. So I'm just repeating that process again, dropping the colour in, taking it back out where I don't want it, leaving some light. I'm sure there's many experts out there saying, oh, you're doing this wrong and you're doing that wrong, but it's the way we learn, isn't it? And I hope this inspires you to get your paints out and just have a play. I was just testing that one, see how dry the other one is. Being careful to go round, because it's tiny little flowers, so I was just being careful to go round it there. having the camera above is usually pretty good, but there are times where, they're just there, my hand was in the way, so you can't actually see what I'm doing, so apologies for that. But I do think overall the above camera angle is the most interesting, so you kind of get to see what I see most of the time. I've just noticed I've got a hard edge there, so I was just trying to soften it, but I've ended up putting a tiny little bit more paint on to try and do that, because that little line had dried, and so I couldn't smudge it with the water. I do love this colour, the way it just kind of, I don't know, just does its own thing really. And I know that's the way I'm putting it on, but it is, I like the way it goes together and creates those little dark shadows, and the granulation looks really cool. Do you see it really well there, where I've left that white part and then I just smudge some over and then take it back off again? If you don't want it stark white, it's just a lighter green. It's a clear way to do it. I'm now protecting it a little bit as I splat some green around. I do like my splats. I love the way that looks. Not too many, just a few. I haven't shown it in here, but I have dried it off from time to time, because, as I say, the paper I'm using is quite thin for watercolour. I do like to use at least a 300 GSM one, but this is a lot thinner. I'm not sure what the make is, but I'm just using it up really, and it does, as you will see as I'm putting this water on, it really does start to buckle the pot, and so even though I've cut it out, there are places that I've actually dried in between just to flatten my paper back down, and it does work. It does flatten back down nicely, but it can give you some interesting looks to your painting when the paper does buckle, because it makes the paint pool in areas. But if you're not, if that's not what you're looking for and you want something a little bit more precise, I did actually colour. See where the stones are sat on. I actually like it looking better with the white there. I don't know, it just looks more artistic. I think when I finish it, I actually colour that in, and I don't like it quite so much. There's just something about leaving that little bit of white edging around those stones at the top of the pot that I quite liked. But sometimes you don't know that, and I didn't realise until I was watching it back that I actually preferred it like that. So, little learning point for myself. But that's what we're all in it for, aren't we? We're learning all the time. Unless we're professional artists that know exactly what they're doing and set out to achieve the look they're setting out to achieve. For me, this is all just a learning curve, and I'm just sharing that journey with you. So I'm repeating that process. As you can see, I've put my colour on, and with the dry brush I'm attempting to take some out. Now I do know from experience that some colours will remove, you can take them back off far easier than others. And as the base of the colour of my pot was an orange, I don't think it is coming off, it didn't come off as well as I'd wanted. I mean, it does give me a highlight, but it's not as bright as the greens. It doesn't come off as easy as what the green did. And you can really see how that paper is buckling now. It's almost making the pot look fluted. I'm using a very small brush there, and what I've done is I've used clean water, even though it didn't look clean. I think it's because my water wasn't clean, although it was water, just to take that pot edge back a little bit. I'd gone over a little bit too far and I didn't like it. So I'm just kind of looking, you can see I've painted in now round the stones, and I definitely preferred that whiter. And I'm just adding a little bit of sort of detail and edging shadows now to the stones, just to get a little bit more of a 3D effect. And I'm just looking, deciding where I want to go next. I'm just blending those strokes a little bit. You can see, from the beginning of the video to sort of now, the sky outside has definitely got lighter, and actually I can see in the video how the painting looks lighter now. So here I'm just adding my little pink flowers. So again, just putting in a quick sort of base coat. And I decide it looks like I'd only done 4, and we know the eye likes to see odd numbers, so I do actually improvise and put another one in just to make it up to the 5. And the colour I was using was a fairly opaque one, so it went over my background successfully. But I wasn't too worried because I knew I was going to sort of do some more, do some more with colour pencils at the end, and there I was showing you my set of pencils that I was using, but I had speeded it up so it actually went a lot faster than I initially thought it would. So I'm just adding a little bit of definition to the flowers with a darker pencil, and then I think I add a lighter one as well, just to emphasise the contrast between the light and the dark. It would look quite nice white as well, I guess. So here I am, I'm just sort of adding some shadows to sort of really define each of the different parts of the plants, to sort of, because obviously they grow from each other, but some are more in front of the than others, and so that makes the others at the back, and so just to help define that a little bit more, just using some of the pencil there for that. And again, the same with the pebbles. Excuse me. Just defining the edge of the pot there a little bit better. I also use some different coloured pencils onto the stones just to add a little bit more interest. So I add some dark green, some purple, and a little bit of blue. So it's the same sort of colour palette. I'm just sort of adding a little bit of a shadow, but I do realise after that I've actually done it the wrong way round. It should have gone towards the left, as that's my darker side, and my right side is the lighter side. So I do correct that later on by just adding more coloured pencil to the table top. Not sure whether it's got a cloth on it. I haven't really thought about that. I'm just sort of wanted a surface for the pot to sit on. So it's something to sort of be mindful about when you are doing your own composition, to think about your light and then to be consistent with that, because quite often we get carried away, or I get carried away, and how I did here, I forgot. I just did where I thought the shade would be, which again is about not using a reference. If I was using a reference, I would have just copied that, but because I wasn't using a reference, so it was out of my head, I actually forgot that my dark side was the left side, and so I just sort of went ahead intuitively and made a mistake. So it's always good to just have that plan, where your light's coming from, where your dark is, and stick to it consistently throughout your composition. It just adds a more realistic, even though it's not meant to be too realistic, you need it looking slightly realistic just to make it work. But it was easily sorted, and I did add just a tiny cast shadow towards the front of it at the end, just to sort of ground it a little bit. And here I am adding sort of the different colours to the leaves, the pebbles. So I kind of thought if the pebbles are shiny, they're probably going to reflect the colours around them a little bit, which is why I sort of chose the green and the purples a little bit, just to add a little bit more interest. And I also used the green on the actual plant, because it added a little bit more texture, which I'm not sure you can see too much in the video, but you definitely can in real life. And again, this is speeded up, I don't really colour that fast. and there we've more or less had it. I just continue, I take the tape off, and it did seep under a little bit like there, but I'm not worried about that. I think that adds to the interest, but this one did tear off a little bit, but fortunately it was a very light tear, so it didn't really ruin my picture. And I take it all off and then realise I can't keep it because my board is actually angled for me to work on, and it starts to slide down. So I was just using a white there just to sort of add a little bit more to the highlights. And I decided I wanted, so I taped it back up actually just down the bottom to keep it still while I did these close-ups, so you could really get a good look at the texture. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's inspired you to get your watercolours out and just have a play. Thank you ever so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.